We're kicking off our section in today's focus on support and success collaboration. And we just heard a great session from John Ragsdale at TSIA on this topic. And continuing right along, there's no one I'd rather have talk about this topic, than Marlene Summers. I know Marlene for over a decade, and she's been someone who's been a strong advocate for cross-functional collaboration. She's a tech executive with a strong focus on technical support and customer success. She's currently the vice president of product success at Salesforce. She manages a number of their cloud offerings, Industry Cloud, Revenue Cloud, Heroku, a number of other functional groups. And she's here today to talk about how to achieve support and customer success synergies with the objective of maximizing business outcomes. And I'm going to turn over here to Marlene in a second, but I will be back at the end to facilitate Q&A. If you have some questions, please enter them in the Q&A tab. And without further ado, welcome, Marlene.
Thank you so much, Joe. I'm super excited to be here with everybody. Kicking us off, I want to set some intentions for the session today. First, just as a leader, I want you to know that I have been in the trenches, as Joe said, just my background. Now I'm at Salesforce. I've been at really small startup companies and kind of different things in between. In the last 15 years, really working on cloud and SaaS, but also some sprinkling of hosted and on-prem products. So my intention here is really to talk about things that I feel very passionate can work when we as support and success leaders think, sometimes in ways that we have been thinking, but also think a little bit differently, and look at some of the outcomes that we can achieve through those connections. So we're going to talk a lot about that with kind of questions and ways that you can think about collaboration and collaboration wins. And kind of the third point on my intention, I do want to make the point that it is a balance. And so while I'm going to pick, and I want to focus on things that you don't necessarily need new headcount to do, or new tools or new investment, that doesn't mean that those aren't great things. But my position will be that if you look at some of the ideas that I'm going to share and you would implement those, that would actually set you up in a position to obtain future headcount, future tools, future data tools, analytics, all that kind of thing would be great. And so just kind of a quote to ground us, you have everything you need to build something far bigger than yourself. So that's how we're going to think through these things. But first, I'm going to talk about a story, and we're going to use this story and metaphor to hopefully guide you through the session. And so even if you forget the topics that I talk about, you'll probably remember the story, and then you can mind map them back. So here's the story. Here's the picture. I showed this to my 9-year-old, and she's like, ew, this is a giant water bug. Okay, so about 7 years ago, at my previous startup company, we had started a women's interest group. And like a lot of times when you start an employee research group, we polled our audience and we said, what kind of activities do you want to do? And a lot of people raised their hand and they said, let's do a self-defense workshop. So I was super excited about this because a long time ago, I actually did some side job as a kickboxing instructor and I hadn't done it in a lot of years. So I'm super excited. So we go down to our gym and we're all there warming up, this, getting ready for our instructor to come for the self-defense class. And he comes in and he takes, thank goodness it was plastic, this bug and drops it in the middle of the gym studio. And he said, team, if you saw this bug and you were alone, what would you do? And so we're all like, run away. Right? Because nobody wants to take on a bug. And just the plastic one he had was like this big. So nobody wants to take on that bug. So that was pretty sure, run away. And that became a theme for the self-defense class, is that obviously prevention and awareness of environments, like you want to avoid having to actually, go against the bug when you can, because you're probably going to lose against the bug. So that's point number one. But the second point is, if you were with somebody who couldn't run away, like a child or a partner or somebody else, what would you do? Well, then you'd have to figure out how the two of you can work together to combat this bug and take it on and literally be successful with that. So with that, I'm going to talk about the beat the bug scenario. So these are 4 particular scenarios that I've encountered, like I said, past 15 years, things that come up that touch support and success, and ultimately our customers, and how, if you were thinking about it from running away, being like, oh, that's not our function, that's not our job, you're leaving the bug there, and then we're leaving our customers with the responsibility of dealing with this item. And instead, how do we partner together to actually combat the bug? And some of these things too, if you do it in advance, you can avoid them, completely. We can kind of touch on that when we talk about product feedback. All right, so I got my 4 beat the bug scenarios for you. And if you look how they're laid out, a little like pretty loosely, but cyclically, it's kind of customer journey. So we're going to start with they buy it, permissions licensing, implementing it, complex technical problems, escalations, and then full circle product feedback. Okay, so permissions and licensing. Why did I pick this one? Oh, and for each of my scenarios, I'll talk about why I picked it. And then we're going to talk about 2 or 3 things that as a support leader, you can double click and lean into, 2 or 3 things as a success leader to go into, and then a common joint kind of initiatives that could be goals that you set, KPIs, V2 moms, OKRs, et cetera, that you could jointly do. So for permissions and licensing, I don't know about all of you, but being part of the post-sales organization, oftentimes we have incredible go-to-market teams and marketing teams, and there's lots of different products that are available. And especially at a company like Salesforce, where we have a platform that's been around for 24 years and we have lots of products on top of it, there's lots of different ways that we sell and go to market, and we have experts in that area. And so I totally don't understand all of what they do, but it's really impressive and amazing. But when it comes down to what our customers see, and when people try to enable these functionality and turn it on, it's not always as straightforward as how it was sold. And so it gets into this question where we think about, okay, well, who should fix that? Because I don't know who I need to go to. And a lot of times we think, okay, well, the product team came up with it and the marketing team came up with it, so they should be able to tell us this thing maps to this thing and this license maps to this license. But sometimes people don't know. And so again, it becomes an area of confusion. There's escalations. It'll get sent to the AE. It'll get sent to support. It'll get sent to success. You're like, okay, what do we do? And if you haven't experienced this, that's probably really good and straightforward. But the more you add kind of new products, new features, new bundle, new suites, add-ons, these things tend to pop up with that kind of rapid product movement. And so we figured out, okay, what are we gonna do about this? And from my perspective, expecting the other teams that are kind of pre-sales to fix that when we're really dealing with the customer's side of it isn't going to happen immediately or even with time. So like, how can we look at this situation differently from the data that we had? John was just talking about all the data points that we have with support cases, and how do we bring that into what our success leaders know in terms of relationship building and onboarding with the customers and improve this particular area. So ideas for you to consider. How do we map the I bought it to turning it on, enabling it, and making it work? So on the support side, we've talked a lot, and there's a lot of things that we collect, from a case data perspective. But I have observed that typically just saying licensing isn't something that we track, because again, licensing is supposed to be taken care of. And just having permissioning as its own thing also is not necessarily it, because there could be different flavors of it. There's different types of features, there's different things. And so it often gets buried down somewhere else. And so in order to address that, it might not be something that's coming at the customer side. Like they don't know it's a licensing problem per se, or a permissioning problem. But you can definitely on the support side drive the data analysis to collection by looking at it. And so that's something that we actually did recently. How many of these types of cases were caused by that? And then we can connect those two to like, okay, what do we need to do to solve those from a deflection point of view? So then that's creating either public facing articles or internal ones on the technical side that will walk through, here's how you resolve this particular one. And we'll talk a little bit later about technical complexity, but this is definitely an area where it can be complicated. And so you do need to learn from the past things that you've seen and document it out. So that would be the second point. And then developing specialized skills and team, because these types of questions don't necessarily come up every single day. You can kind of overpopulate if you assume everybody in the organization can do that. So having certain people that are just laser focused on it and can do it very quickly and resolve things will improve the customer experience, because you don't want a situation where something goes on for too long because multiple people kind of have a general idea about it, but they're not super specialized. It's like, how do I make this actually activate, and click all those buttons in between. So look at the specialization angle. On the success side, really looking at how we make sure that the account teams and the sales teams will escalate. Obviously, there's usually several different vehicles internally where people can go. We like to streamline things, through Slack, and not particularly just Slack messages and Slack channel proliferation, because that's really hard to manage. But we do that through Slack workflows. And then also with Service Cloud with formal case escalations there, and then our integration in between. So those are ways that you think about how do you want your other teams to engage with you. And that is the place where we would lean into our success leaders to drive that with the account teams. So just be able to get the information over so that it's quick and fast, and it's easy for the support team to digest and resolve the issue. And then in terms of also managing that relationship with the executives, there are some situations where enabling might involve, refreshing an org or doing something else that has some kind of turnaround time that's involved kind of on the back end processing. So let's make sure that we have that clarity up front on how long things will take, and then the expectations can be set accordingly. And then there was also in John's presentation about onboarding. So I think there's a lot that can be done on the success side right now with the people we have when we look at the experience that's going on right now. What are the gaps? What are customers, again, is licensing a particular gap with onboarding or setting up the right permissions? If those are things that your success people are seeing, let's figure out how we get that into the formal onboarding program, the formal enablement. And that will come from understanding what's going on and then giving those inputs to the team to coordinate on that. So bringing it together, better together. What I would encourage is when you see these types of issues, not to come back and say, oh, licensing that's the products, the product manager needs to do that, or the ops team needs to do that, or somebody else. Understand and recognize when there isn't a challenge. It's our job as post-sales teams to figure out how do we serve the customer best, and how are we going to push this one forward, and then how are we going to avoid things in the future. So that comes to the third bullet: pre-production, hands-on, setup, and testing. This is one of the things that I think as product people that we love, both support people and success people, we actually do like our products, and we do like getting our hands dirty and setting them up. So one of the best ways to avoid the customer kind of seeing any kind of issues with something new that's coming out is we do it first. Now, again, you can say, oh, well, my QE team, my QA team should be doing that. And they do with time as things mature. That will be built into the engineering organization to do that, especially at the large scale and more complex things. But as products are really rapid and coming out, we are in a really good position to that. Most of us can have access to a sandbox or multiple sandboxes. Salesforce, we have lots of developer orgs. Like, we get demo orgs, like you can get lots of different ways, and have some of your specialized, higher banded, more experienced, tenured people, give them this opportunity, both on the support side and also on the success side. Give them the opportunity to get into it, figure out, okay, this will need to be turned on here, this will need to be turned down here, document it, all good, happy. And when it goes out, then all the customers have a seamless experience. All right, second one, implementation and out of scope issues. This one is a super passionate area for myself. I've happened to work on a lot of different products that do require some degree of implementation. So when I talked about turning it on, yeah, you can turn it on, but then there is a period of time, weeks, months, years, where there's activity being involved from developer teams on the customer side, with a SI partner developer, with our Salesforce professional services team, somebody involved in doing that kind of implementation. And so, in my last 15 years, I've also done a lot of different experimentation with ways that we handle implementation or things that we consider out of scope for support. So again, in the past, just not even allowing customers into the support system. So you're saying, oh, you're not live, you can't even talk to me. Or if they come in, close it, send it to somebody else. What I've observed, and I liked in the previous session too, that John showed on the timeline for customer success and support and how things have kind of progressed over the years, there'd be a similar timeline for professional services, where I would say, 13 years ago when I started at my previous company as a customer success manager, the implementations were what we called big bang. They were sometimes going to take years to implement the product and the whole solution. And so what happened, as we were a SaaS company, when you'd hit the 1 year mark at the renewal and there was no live system yet, that became a pain point for professional services. And so the movement from that point on was to eliminate the big bang and was to go to this kind of iterative phase-based go lives. And when I joined Velocity, which ended up getting acquired by Salesforce in 2020, we actually had a model for our go lives being 6 weeks. So drive to a really quick, viable go live and then iterate from there. And I think most places now and most philosophies are going to talk about iterative implementation. So this idea that you can block your customers from using your support team until they're done go living is not really applicable anymore. So we have to evolve. And on the related point too, that our customers expect developer level technical support. If you have a technical product, you can't even offer included support and say like, no, you can't ask me a technical question. I'm not going to cover that. So there is this expectation that they're going to want this type of support because that's what they're needing to do to use the product. And we've also seen too, this blurring of traditionally support would say, well, I don't do hands-on coding of your solution. Again, that would be professional services. And there was this line, coding hands-on versus not. Well, now it's kind of getting blurred because there is elements of coding that's done. There's configuration. There's reading kind of debug types of logs. And there's all these different things. So to say that support is hands-off to me is not actually accurate anymore. I think there could have been a time where it was in an old, on-premise model where we didn't even see the code. But now we do, customers can share code. There are those things that are out there. There are debug logs that are putting out messages based on custom code. And so it's not as clear to say like, no, I don't do that. I don't do that. And the reality is the customers bought a product and they need a solution. And they were looking to us as the post-sales team to give them a solution. So what do we do with this one? Who are you going to call when professional services isn't an option? Because one of the things we do try to do, and I actually ask often, I'm like, oh, is there anybody from services involved or is there a consultant involved? And a lot of times The success people will say, no, there isn't. Or if there is, those consultants are also asking us questions about the product, questions about how they do their solution. So just saying that another team is going to take care of it doesn't necessarily get you the outcome that's going to satisfy your customer. So things that we can look at on the support side, including enhanced developer support for your highest customer plan folks. So for Salesforce, we have signature support. We include a robust portion of that, saying developer support, to look at up to 1,000 lines of custom code, to the evil word custom code. But we need to be able to provide that level of service. And even for some of our products that need technical help, like Flow, we used to not be able to have the customers that had standard support be able to file the developer cases for Flow. And then we made that change because it didn't actually make sense, because they needed help to be able to understand how to use Flow that was qualifying as developer support. So although your reaction might be like, no, I don't want to do that because it will be blah, 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 it is what our customers are looking for. And I think the times where we could say, no, we don't do that, we're not going to touch these types of things, isn't going to get us the outcomes that we need for the customers. And connected to that too, just the term out of scope is definitely a trigger word. You've probably seen this. If you've had your support engineers write that, you will get back, negative feedback. Sometimes obviously from the customer, but also from other internal folks. And then you try to defend it. And I think, again, when you talk about your highest plan customers too, to come with a point of view that, I'm not doing that, you're not thinking holistically as a company. We're basically just trying to push it out of our function. So how do we work together, and particularly with our success peers, to think about, okay, maybe it's not in scope for a reactive support case, but is there a opportunity to offer expert coaching to this customer? Is there a webinar out there that could solve this? Is there a training course out there? Is there a trial? Is there lots of different ways? Is it a conversation with an account manager to walk them through their scenarios? There are lots of ways to approach it versus slamming the door and saying out of scope. So on the success side too, we have a huge catalog of these different types of offerings. And so one of the initiatives that we looked at this year is, not that there was too many, but it was almost overwhelming for a success person or the customer to know exactly which asset would be most valuable to them. Kind of my equivalent would be from a restaurant perspective. If you go into like a fast casual place and there's this huge menu of 20 different pages, and you're like, I don't know which one to pick, right? Versus if you go to a 5-star, rated Michelin star restaurant and there's 4 choices, there's just more cultivated, higher end quality coming out of the Michelin star restaurant. So what we've done is not narrowed it down to 4, but really been intentional and rationalizing what the offerings are and mapping it to specific types of scenarios that customers have or problems, so that we can say, hey, you should actually use this, and then directing that over to whenever the requests come in that could be something that in the past we'd say is out of scope. No, let's see how we can keep this. It is in scope. We just need to find the right team to figure out what to do with it. And the second point on success, again, it'll take a little bit of a change of a mindset, but we've seen some good success in measuring some of the metrics that you would typically think of as support KPIs, applying them to some of these success engagements, such as here's the number of requests coming in, inflow, TTR, here's how long they would take. So in the past, in different things, it was like, well, it takes as long as it takes, because it's the customer. They can kind of decide when they want to do it. But we always know from a prevention standpoint, if we just let somebody have something go on, it's not necessarily going to optimize our resources that we have, and it's not going to get them the output and the outcomes that they need as quickly as they want. So measuring that too, the same way we measure cases, and then we have a kind of standard to start with, and then we can correct it as needed. And CSAT too. So this is something I hadn't seen in my past companies before coming to Salesforce, but for all these different success engagements, what is the CSAT? And that's, traditionally though, I always thought of success and we did MPS, which is great, but adding that transactional CSAT is also super powerful because it has a high touch point. There's a lot of these different types of engagements that happen. So that's really cool. So what you'll get from this better together. So when you start doing that type of measuring, you can have this unified data-driven scorecard. John mentioned it with our Salesforce customer health score that was recently announced. And again, that has lots of years of data and challenges and things that came to that point. So even if you're way earlier on and you don't have all these types of things yet, you can start with what you have. You don't need to buy a new system necessarily just to do this. Look at the data that you have, measure it however you can do it now. And then that will, with time and investment, get it to something that can be a unified scorecard and you can put for support and success. Second one, monthly reviews and quarterly business reviews per product line. This has been super impactful for us because it's really giving us that whole view of our product lines with support and success together. And for us having that relationship too with the product and engineering teams as one voice, we'll talk about it too in the last part about product feedback, is really powerful. And you see kind of, if you're struggling also with the point that, the success people and the support people at the ground level maybe don't coordinate as much as their senior leadership thinks, these are great ways to get that coordination to happen kind of organically. Because you're like, hey, we have a monthly meeting. Let's get the data together. We have a quarterly review. Let's get the data together. Let's get the conversations going. It's a really good kind of forcing function to make those conversations happen. And then they just start happening and you don't have to monitor because they're going to happen because they're going to be part of the review. And then I was talking too about routing the requests. This is something that we continue to work on too as well. It's not a magic thing to just say, oh yeah, overnight we're just going to route everything to different teams, because we do know teams are in different systems and they use success could use the gain side and supports using Service Cloud, and there's different things like that. But you can use products. Like I said, we make heavy use of Slack. You can have ways and build in ways with the technology that you use now to route those requests. So think about doing that together. And so you're not putting the customer in the position of trying to go to this team and go to this team and then get frustrated and escalate. All right, number 3, driving complex technical resolutions. I love this one. Obviously, being a support engineer by background, when I think about this too as well, and back to the theme about not necessarily needing new headcount, a lot of times when we see if you don't have enough headcount, you'll see delays and cracks in the system that can result in things not happening fast enough, not a fast enough response, not a fast enough resolution, etc. But just adding more people doesn't necessarily help with dealing with technical complexities. And even more particularly, when you add new headcount into a support function or into the success function, because there is those months of kind of onboarding and training and enablement, there's even more of a gap where you just didn't add the people and they can all of a sudden figure out the most technically complicated issues as well. So when you have a fast growing team that is actually adding headcount, it is even more important to focus in on understanding technical complexities. And we all know that those types of cases and issues will totally drive the negative things that we don't want to see from our KPI perspective, like how you measure escalations or red accounts, CSAT, NPS. These are all negative things that happen. And a lot of times when you look at those problems or cases that got raised, there's complexity there. There is it is challenging to figure out what is going on. And that's why it, quote, took so long, or there was a lot of people involved, or that kind of stuff. And so what we need to focus on, both on the support side and the success side, is how do we handle these escalations as excellently as possible. It is just a non-starter to say it's the product, it's this, it's that. we have to do this. I think of it as like the bread and butter of our organization. If you can't do this well, again, bad outcomes will happen too. But we're also not serving our customers, which is the most important thing. So how you show up in the crisis is going to be critical for the perception internally and also externally. And again, more people can be great at times, but it doesn't necessarily fix when something is super complicated and we don't know what's going on. So what I recommend and what I think has worked the best for me and in my experience is thinking about co-piloting these technical resolutions between support and success throughout your organization. And so what co-piloting would mean is, first of all, not finger pointing back at each other. So not saying the success people complaining, oh, I have to spend X percentage of time managing support escalations, and not the support leader saying, well, why can't the success people manage their accounts because I'm doing all these cases? So stopping those types of thinking and thinking about it literally, as a co-pilot, like two people on a plane. We know that there's going to be technical challenges and complexities with some issues. And how do we together navigate those through our organization? So as support leaders on the support side, really developing robust support management oversight over these things. And so how this shows up for me, what I would see, and I think most, folks here listening probably run a 24/7 operation, and you probably have a construct called a handoff. So when you're looking at support and you're looking at handoffs, are you actually handing off and creating meaningful updates in these handoffs on these technically challenging issues? Or are things kind of just siloing around? And if they're siloing around, there is a possibility that we don't have the right technical people in place. We haven't escalated it to the right level or the right team or the right person. And that is going to contribute to the delay in solving it, and ultimately going to contribute to the negative things that are going to happen. So really building that into the system. We have pager duty. We have ways to alert that stuff too. But at the fundamental kind of management level, looking at what's going on and asking the question, are the right people involved? Are they progressing it? Is there, in the day now with ChatGPT and those types of answers, but is there unique progressing updates on cases? Or are people just re-summarizing things that have happened? And we're doing too much re-summarizing. We don't have, again, the right technical skills to take it forward, and we're not going to be able to effectively co-pilot it. So to me, then the plane is kind of still going down. So we need to course correct on that. And on the success side too, getting a sufficient level of technical proficiency along with the timeline. I think we saw in the early days too, and myself included, like I understood my product really well as a customer success manager. And then as success moved more into like business outcomes, it was more on, perhaps the selling or the soft selling side. But we should never be, as part of a product success organization of anybody, saying, oh, I'm not technical, so I don't know what to do. Escalate. You don't have to know how to solve the question. And even as a support leader, I don't expect you to solve the case either. But I do expect you to understand your product, understand if it's on top of a platform, understand environments to the extent that it would make sense. Like if something is not reproducible in another environment, it's more likely to be a configuration or a data issue versus a product defect. So you should be using the language and supporting the theme within your organization's success that you should be technically proficient as it pertains to being a good co-pilot, being able to help your customers and help the support team and help other functions navigate through these technical complexities. And on a related one, making sure that, we typically have access to the same systems, right? We can see support data, again, lots of data things, lots of data in Slack, there's data lots of places. So making sure on the success side that leaders and success practitioners read what's going on and say, hey, like, I see that this is happening. Well, how can we help out? What is this? Should this particular thing be happening with this product? like show that you're reading it, because that will also help with the collaboration part, because there's definitely intense situation, frustrations on all sides when people don't feel that the other side is actually reading what's going on. And as employees in the same company, we do have access to the same types of information and systems. So show that you know what's going on and you're here to help and what can we do, and being that supportive ally will really help to build that relationship together and be better. So to bring those all together, shared responsibility on the technical escalations, accountability, know this team or that team, bring it all together, prevent unnecessarily false alarms. Like these are bound to happen. People make mistakes and they pull the fire alarm too soon. But as you learn from those and mature, really establishing that when something is serious, then we pull out the big guns. But do the due diligence beforehand and make sure that you avoid anything unnecessary. And then showing up as a united front in the customer interactions. So sometimes this shows up as a call or meeting or all those different types of things too. And I think it's great to have those joint support and success meetings with customers. And again, not be like, oh, it's your job or it's that job. Bring us together, have the customer know that we act and we talk all the time. And it'll really give them that confidence kind of moving out of whatever the technical issue is and then onto their daily business. All right, and the last one is probably one of everyone's favorite, product feedback. Why I picked this one, we all know we have lots of different ways that our customers do speak to us through support tickets, through different conversations, through community sites, all these different places. And even with all of, the great kind of automation and things that we have in place and places that customers can request things, there still is a real desire from the customer side to be heard and acknowledged from the people with the decision-making power. And so a lot of times customers, rightly know that's going to be the product managers. But we know our product managers can't meet with every single customer about every single thing that they want. And so again, we've built these other kind of systems and ways that they can give input and stuff. But still, sometimes the customers are coming to us and they're like, well, they really want this thing. And they're trying to figure out how they can get that to the people with the power. And we're kind of stuck with this thing. And we're like, okay, well, what do we do? And we're both seeing these kind of things coming from the customers. And, when you think about too, even the title like product support and product success, we are our products. And so when there's a thinking like, oh, why should I have to do this? Like the product manager should do it. Again, we are literally the product. So when people are like, well, it shouldn't be my job to figure out what's going on with the product. No, it really is our job. We are the product. We are the face of the product to our customers. And so let's not forget that we support the products. And yes, there's problems with products and there's things that people need to learn about products. So let's be that conduit and embrace our name for that. So on this side, how do we think about a united voice of the customer front? So not just ticket data, not just what success teams have in mind when they talk to customers and stuff, but kind of bringing that all together. So what works really well for us here on the support side, recognizing those, we call them top case drivers, recognizing those TCDs from the customer cases. I talked about that monthly and QBR types of cadence that we do jointly for support and success. We also run a cadence like that with the engineering and product team per product area, so we can give them those TCDs. And then it ties to the bullet number 2, which is submit long-term requests. I think one of the things that we get caught up with support is we see a problem today and we're like, wow, I need this fixed like today. And we don't remember that our product teams are doing release planning years out at this point. And now, granted, there's flexibility to move things in and out. But for some of these longer term requests, we're like, we really would love to have a tool that could do X, Y, D on the debugging side. We really, here's a defect. It's not super high priority, but if we eliminated this kind of defect or, feature gap, we could eliminate 1,000 support cases per quarter. And so we put these kind of things into the quarterly reviews, but think of them as longer term requests, which is a little different than this, emergency concept that we kind of think about sometimes with support tickets. Lean into their schedule. It is longer out. you'll have a better chance of getting those things in the future by planning out more strategically on that part. And on the success side, thinking about what are right now, because again, we're dealing with our current product. So if we are working with customers and there are ways that they have developed implementation and solutions to go around potential gaps in the products or functionality that doesn't exist, how do we make sure that other customers can take advantage of that? And so those are things that, again, by tying in the support data and the conversations and the interactions that success people have, you can find these things, pretty often, especially when you're dealing with customers that have similar use cases. Like, oh, well, we might not have this enhancement yet, and it's coming in 2 releases. But for now, here's the potential field implementation that will work. Here's an approach that you can take. Here's how you can set up X, Y, Z. We have this information. We need to share it with the customers. And if we leave it, just to support or just to success, there's often kind of this voided kind of middle part. So fill that middle part in with sharing that kind of information and highlighting the programs too, customer advisory boards, executive steering committees. These are all those programs that will have your customers feel that point that they're getting to the right stakeholders. And they don't have to be for every single customer, but for the customers that kind of have that wish list of like top 10 features, giving them that voice and bringing that into that is a great avenue for them to feel heard and valued as the product team continues to add all that feedback in there. So better together, identified in those shared common metrics for the voice of the customer stuff. So again, this can get presented back into your quarterly and monthly reviews with the product and engineering organization, collaborating with them. And also too, just kind of the last wrap up point on that, ensuring a global team participation. So different kind of products and companies tend to have engineering and product teams in different areas of the world. And, mostly for support and success, we also have people around the world. But sometimes the kind of product focus can be very US specific. And so as a global team, making sure, I think on our side, that we're getting global participation, not just from our global employees, but from the customer base too. So I think it's on us to really promote that, to make sure we're building the products that are going to serve as much of the global audience as possible. So to wrap up, just really quick takeaways. So we've transformed our giant water bug into a ladybug because ladybugs are so pretty and cute and everybody likes them. So key takeaways: talk more, human first. I love, ChatGPT and generative AI, but we're still humans. We're still employees. Talk to each other. Think about things maybe a little differently than you had in the past, and measure more of those things too as well with what you have. Eventually, you can get more tools and analytics and maybe some data sciences. But for now, you do have a lot of things to measure, and so think about that meaningfully. And then celebrate the wins. You take some of those bullets and you have some successes, put those into your QBRs, you'll get some good feedback, and then you can move on and get more and more things as you go forward.
Fantastic, Marlene. This is so insightful. As you said, you've been in the trenches for so long, and now your leadership spans all of these functions, and you've really seen it. And one of the quotes I love that you said, we're going to quote you on it, is "We are the product. I am the product." And that's such a great philosophy. I think organizations should take out, right? We don't have to defer inquiries to a product manager. We need to all embody and represent the product, especially being in the technology field that we are. There are some questions coming in. We have a few minutes here for questions. If you have some more, please add to the Q&A. Sorry, go ahead. You had one more slide before I jumped in.
Oh yeah. It's just a wrap-up slide that you can access on demand, different best practices that we have here at Salesforce in product success. Lots of cool stories of things that are going on, and happy to continue any conversations that anybody wants to have offline.
Awesome. So let me start with this question. you talk a lot about the collaboration efforts and what are the list of things that both teams should do, support, CS. What, in your estimation, is one skill that support teams should learn from the customer success role to improve collaboration and vice versa?
I would say, I think one area that support teams don't necessarily realize is for support or for success individuals being assigned to accounts, that they spend a lot of time with particular accounts versus support has, high volume and goes through lots of different ones. So it's almost the difference between like your close family and just more like acquaintances. And when you're dealing with the same customers on, like there is just a very high expectation, and there's a very short kind of window that they'll expect an answer or a resolution or a path forward. And it's easy to forget, like when you're dealing with thousands of cases and customers are like, well, whatever, like I'm busy, I have these other ones, and not realizing a success manager maybe has 10 accounts and they're paying them, every other day on certain ones. And so just because there's less accounts, that they're dealing with, but they're more focused and they're more, personal, and they have like their cell phone number. Right? So, and in the same way too, sometimes if you have a bad support interaction, it's like, okay, move on. Well, if a success manager has a bad account, like that's a really bad, scenario to be in. They can't it's not going to just go away when the ticket's over. And they're, it's really important to like, I think, have that empathy that they're like named to this account. And we all know there are challenging accounts. And so have a lot of like empathy for that, and know like you can't just dismiss it and move on to the next one. They need to figure out what's the best kind of outcome for their accounts.
So empathy on the support side and a focus on accounts. And is it fair to say that success tends to be more focused on accounts just by the numbers, and support tends to be more focused on cases because they span a broad number? And that may be a generalization, but how do we get them more aligned, right, to both solve the problem and also care about the accounts? It's a good segue to another question here around escalations. You had mentioned, I think in one of your early charts, you show that on the customer success side, defining the account escalation process. That was a little surprising to me. What parts do they take on from support in that process?
Well, I think one of the things that we've found is the success folks have that, named recollect like way to navigate the sales organization a lot more than the support folks. I mean, it's not just the name of the person, but even knowing how the geography, usually the success, org is going to be aligned also similar to sales versus support is more on the product side. So we don't really know like, well, who would you go to for this? Who is this AE going to? That like that whole kind of navigation part. So it's really about thinking that
point of contact,
can know how to help them get to us the right way. And so, I think tactically on the escalation part too, how do they do that? Because typically, in the past, people would fire off an email. But now as we've moved away from emails, there are a lot of different systems. And sometimes the AE doesn't really know what system. And so they're more likely to just broadcast it out. But if it's not going to the right place, then it's not going to get solved as quickly as possible. So we always want to have the problem sent to the right team as quickly as possible. I think that that's where the success person would be able to help know. Also, if they have any types of, those types of reoccurring meetings with the sales organization, we don't tend to have those in support, at least at the size of Salesforce. So it's a good way to like plug in like, hey, even if it's a slide, here's what you should do if you encounter this problem, and it's great. And then they'll follow that.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm smiling because we have that challenge too with sales and marketing, sales not knowing which channel to submit requests through. So they tend to get blasted all over.
Right.
We joke about it internally here as well. So There's another question around the KPIs. You spent a lot of time talking about the metrics and measure. I love your key takeaway, measuring more meaningfully. So it sounds like there's a case to be made to improve collaboration through fewer KPIs to align support and success. Which ones, hot take, which ones would you drop that have sort of been lingering for a while, and which ones would you really prioritize?
Yeah, my personal one, actually somebody wrote it in the chat on John's one about there is, with a higher level success plan, one of the things we all love is the response time SLA. We're like, yay, response time SLA. But to this day, like 15 years into SaaS, I still get escalations and questions, internally, but also from customers. I get people saying like, well, you missed SLA. And so you go and you look and you're like, no, we didn't miss it. I mean, it's tracked and it's there and it says we made it, but they don't really mean SLA. They don't mean that contractual 15-minute response. They mean it took too long. Mm-hmm. And so what people really want, and what I feel will be, and I don't know what year it could come in, but if we could actually think about, could you offer a resolution time SLA? That's what people want. Now I know we're like, no, we can't. It's like, or the fire analogy. Like I can send a fire truck to a house within X miles and I'll commit to that, but I don't know what's there. And I'm not going to commit to how
long is it going to take to put out the fire?
Or the medical one. My family's mostly in the medical background. So if I go into the ER, like I could commit that somebody, at a certain triage level will get seen, but I don't know what's going on. So I'm not sure like how long it's going to take to fix it. True. But, even with original hardware companies, they have resolution SLAs. They say, I'm going to run in that data center and swap out that router in 15 minutes. And so maybe as software evolves and we evolve, we could figure out what we would need to do to offer something like that. Because I feel that the initial, especially now in the automated world, now we do real SLAs because we want to send real people, but the origin of that was really the days where I would pick up the phone to the vendor and I want to make sure they picked up the line. It doesn't really cover the internet where I can automate a response. You get a ticket number, you can escalate on Twitter. Like that wasn't what it was meant to. Now we still sell it like that, but I think that the progression will be people want to know that it'll be solved. And I want that as a customer. And so we just need to figure out how we could get there.
Yeah, great comment from Steve. I'd be fine with resolution SLAs if we could throw out product bugs. But I have a hard time getting customers to understand that, what is a bug and what isn't. Sort of goes to the scoping question as well.
Right. Yeah.
You spent a lot of time talking about the out of scope issues. And, my sort of reaction was, and as a technology buyer, there's sort of a customer level of disappointment, right? If you buy something and then you expect it to turn on a certain way, maybe you don't understand all the technical underpinnings, but then you're told, no, this is out of scope. It triggers a professional service scoping effort, et cetera. What are your thoughts there on just sort of better managing customer expectations? That seems like another collaboration area for success and support.
Yeah, and then that's too, it also ties to personas of who's contacting you, because what my feedback has been to my teams, and again, in past companies and stuff, you could do things differently. But right now, when you have a person submitting a technical support case, there's no planet that person is likely someone that could cut an SOW with a professional services organization. Just like a totally, we have this like huge percentage, especially in my products, of developers filing. They're not in any position to get a feedback that they should go buy services. And so that's just the wrong place to be ever sending that message. Now there are, and definitely success people are often assigned accounts where there are those needs. And then that's where we need to have a good way to route those things and then prioritize them and then decide, okay, who should get what's an investment, or what do we have to push on to sell? and have those types of things. But I agree with you, like to go back at customers and say like, oh no, someone else needs to do that, when it's the same company and you're also speaking to the wrong person, it doesn't go well. We need to do better on that.
Makes sense. So we're at time almost here. What, parting words, you've delivered a lot of great prescriptive advice. You could write a great playbook here. Maybe you're thinking about doing that. A lot of people think, where do I start, right? What's the one thing I go home today and do with my counterpart? Any parting words there?
Yeah, I really feel that what turned the tables for me in recent time was those QBRs, and it was really bringing the teams and the leaders together in meetings. I mean, literally, again, it's the same people, but we often were not meeting to like brainstorm and stuff. We were meeting about problem accounts or something else going on, but we weren't meeting to do this type of work. And so that as the function to actually have the conversations, I think to me has gotten the most results versus in the past ways of even setting sometimes like annual goals. They're kind of like high level, and they didn't again force meetings to happen. And I do think it's on leaders too. Like you need to create the structure for your teams to engage. If you don't, they'll keep going off in the silos, and then the finger pointing and all that kind of stuff. So making people like have to talk together for the outcomes that we like, some of the ideas that we talked here, like, can we do this? Could we do this differently? Can we do this? Like all of those things, just try, attempt some of them, because there's definitely power in talking about it. Even if you decide, no, we're not going to do that, at least you have a conversation about it. But I think that to me has been more powerful than some of the other past things that come down.
So back to the communication.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Let's leave it there. Thank you, Marlene. Great to see you as always. Appreciate you joining us. Thanks, everyone.